Good morning. This morning, I forgot to mention this at the last service. Pastor Steve, he kind of takes a short sabbatical during the month of July, and we'd like to give him a break so he can recoup and get re-energized. And we just really appreciate the chance of y'all letting me speak. And so if you're here for the first time, I've already told one person this. If you're here for the first time, you have to at least come back one more time so you can hear him speak, all right? But if this is your first time, we're really glad for you to be here. We are going to continue today with a series called Closer, just in the sense of drawing closer to God, deepening that relationship, what that looks like, not just in high, lofty terms, but on a day-to-day basis. What does that look like? And today, we're going to be talking specifically about worship. Well, if this isn't your first time here and you've been here for a little while, you've heard Pastor Steve mention once or twice or about a dozen times about how unresponsive I am. And not a very expressive person, and that's true. I'm not completely dead on the inside. I do have some feelings. I love my kids in a way. But it's true. I'm not a happy, clappy, kind of expressive type person. This kind of reminds me of something that happened not too long ago. My family and we went to go see the movie Inside Out. You heard about that one? Yeah, good movie, really cute. And so what you don't know is that if you live in a house full of women, is that after a movie that may have some sadness in it, they have to compare notes not only on whether or not they cried, but how much. Had no idea that this was coming. It just happens. Did you cry? I cried. How much did you cry? Was it the single tear? Did you weep like an insane person? And I'm just driving. I'm just trying to not make eye contact, straining to wrap my head around this, and then I heard, it was a good cry. A good cry? Is that really a thing? All the women are like, well, yeah, and all the men are just, what? Never once have I gone to another dude and said, Hank, was it a good cry? It's never happened. Not gonna, so I, like most men, kind of keep their emotions all nice and bottled up because that's what culture tells us to do. You just take all your emotions, you wad them up into a tight little ball, you shove them way down deep, you turn them into an ulcer, and then you just deal with it later. And, and if, I can't speak to all men, but I think a lot of guys are this way, myself included. The truth of the matter is that below the surface, we are often a seething cauldron of emotion that we just try to keep a very tight lid on. And the neat thing, one of the neatest things that we learn when it comes to understanding worship is that I can express myself in full to God. Whatever it is I'm dealing with, whatever emotion, issue, problem, circumstance, barrier, obstacle, whatever, I can, and how I feel about them, I can express that in full to God anytime that I want to. And here's the part that a lot of us don't know. The more honest you are, men and women, the more honest you are in that expression, the more benefits you will receive. The more honest, not how loud, not how public, but how honest you are in that expression, the more benefits you will receive. It's a very, very, so, and because, guys, we just, we're kind of, society teaches us that, there's certain emotions that you shouldn't express, or maybe we should, but don't, because that's what we're told. And you learn that there are certain people that can't handle the expression of an emotion. You ever have that happen? You just kind of expressed how you're really feeling to somebody, and it just kind of blew up in your face a little bit, or they just didn't handle it very well. There's some people that you just can't express an emotion to. God, you can. Whatever it is that you're going through. And you can just lay that before him and get some we're going to be talking about what you get out of it in a little bit. But just that expression, that venting, a lot of times is what we need more than anything else. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk our way through Psalm 27. We're going to take a look at that. And I just want to sort of walk us through it. Once you understand the background of the passage, it's very easy to understand. And this is David speaking. David got in trouble a lot. He was always in trouble. Sometimes it was his fault, sometimes it was someone else's, but he got in trouble a lot. And so this time he's in trouble. We're pretty sure that this is sort of an outside circumstance. We're not exactly sure what situation he's praying about. We just know that there's an issue involving other people. And so he is going to God, and this is Psalm 27. And as you turn there, the background to this is that he knew that God had made him a promise. God said that you will be king of Israel. You're going to be the king, and as long as you follow me, you will remain king. That's it. You're going to be king of Israel. As long as you follow me, you will remain king. And so David, knowing that promise, knowing how God has provided for him in the past, he comes to him saying these things. Okay? So verse 1, he says this: "The Lord is my light and my salvation, so why should I be afraid?" Light is a very common expression of comfort. For us, lights are commonplace. You just flip a switch. For them, there was some preparation involved. There was some cost involved. There was it wasn't always readily available. So light was a source of comfort. Salvation, of course, meaning that he saves me. Sometimes physically, sometimes spiritually. In this situation, physically. "The Lord is my fortress, protecting me from danger. So why should I tremble? When evil people come to devour me, when my enemies and foes attack me, they will stumble and fall. Though a mighty army surrounds me, my heart will not be afraid. Even if I am attacked, I will remain confident." In other words, God is in control. God's in control. My life may be difficult, but God is in control. Verse 4, the one thing, and this is kind of a key verse, "The one thing I ask of God, the thing I seek most, is to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, delighting in the Lord's perfections and meditating in his temple." In other words, worshiping God, delighting in his perfections, worshiping God, and meditating on knowing in a deeper way who God is. Worship. Key verse. Verse 5, "For he will conceal me there when troubles come. He will hide me in his sanctuary. He will place me out of reach on a high rock." As you go through the Psalms, you'll see the word rock and fortress and tower used often. Those are all, walls were made out of rock, fortresses as well, towers as well. Rocks signify strength and unchangeable. Rocks don't change. And strength. And so God is my rock. He's my strength. He's my protection. And he's talking about how that protection is tied to worshiping God. I worship God, and I gain that protection and strength. "Then I will hold my head high above my enemies who surround me." In other words, holding your head high, that's not pride, that's victory. So David is saying, I'm not just going to elude my enemies. I'm not going to evade my enemies. I will triumph over them. There will come a time where I will have victory, they will have defeat. It's not just me trying to skulk around and stay out of their way. "At his sanctuary, I will offer sacrifices with shouts of joy, singing and praising the Lord with music. Hear me as I pray, O Lord. Be merciful and answer me. My heart has heard you say, 'Come and talk with me.' And my heart responds, 'Lord, I am coming.'" So David did more than just think about his needs, hope that God would take care of him, offer the occasional, "Lord, please give me a break." There was an open line of communication where he went to God on a regular basis. God, these are your promises. Please fulfill your promises. And he would spend time worshiping him because of those. Do not turn your back on me. This is where it gets a little interesting. Verse 9, do not turn your back on me. Do not reject your servant in anger. You have always been my helper. Don't leave me now. Don't abandon me, O God of my salvation. Did David deserve God's help? No. David was a sinner. David made mistakes. He did not deserve God's blessings. He did not deserve God's help. Do we? No. Do I? No. I don't. And yet, David recognized himself as that sinner, but also recognized God's blessing and favor and promises. And so, in verse 10, he says this, even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord will hold me close, meaning that God's relationship is stronger than any other. But do you see there's a flip-flop going back and forth in David's thinking? The Lord will never abandon me. God, please don't abandon me. The Lord will never abandon me. Do you see how he just kind of, have you ever prayed that way? God loves me. I think, God's going to help me through this. I hope, his promises apply to everyone, and me too. There's just this weird going back and forth, a wrestling, if you will, with the promises and reminding ourselves that, yeah, they apply to me too. So if you've ever done that in your prayer time, in your worship time, you're not alone. 11, verse 11, teach me how to live, O Lord. Lead me along the right path, for my enemies are waiting for me. Obedience also keeps him out of his enemies' hands. Do not let me fall into their hands, for they accuse me of things I've never done. With every breath, they threaten me with violence. Every breath, meaning that they are full to the brim with murderous hatred. They just, even as they breathe out violence and ideas of trying to destroy him. 13, yet I am confident I will see the Lord's goodness while I am here in the land of the living. Not, well, one day I'll die and I'll go to heaven and then everything will be all right. But there's promises that are going to be enacted and paid out in full here on earth. God said he would do this, and I'm acting on that. Verse 13, wait patiently for the Lord, be brave and courageous. Yes, wait patiently for the Lord. Wait, meaning a confident expectation, not just tapping your foot, twiddling your thumbs, but there's a knowledge that God will come through. And to do that, waiting also implies that I'm going to continue this. I will continue to pray. I will continue to worship. I will continue doing these things, whether good times, bad times, rough times, confusing times. I will wait upon the Lord. So David just lays it all out there and really expresses what it is that he's going through. I want to talk today. I almost did an entire series on worship. There's so many things that we can say about worship. There's a lot of things that we can say about worship in terms of what it is not. Very often we tie worship to certain activities that's part of it, but it's not the full picture, and it's definitely not the only way. But I wanted to sort of just kind of talk to you today about what are some of the always. Worship is always this, so that you can have sort of a foundation. And then we'll talk a little bit about how that's kind of played out in life. So the first one is this. Worship is knowing God is bigger than you. Worship is knowing that God is bigger than you. Bigger than you, bigger than your problems, bigger than your blessings, bigger than whatever circumstance you may be going through. And I don't know about you. Actually, I do, because we all do this. We're on this constant path of learning that and relearning that and being reminded of that God is bigger. And I don't know about you, but I have to be reminded often. There's just this constant need to be reminded, God has it in control. You may be going through a difficult time. It may not seem that way. Your feelings may be leading you astray, but that's what's going on. In Psalm 27:1, really the first 3 verses, the Lord is my light and my salvation, so the Lord is my fortress. Why should I be afraid? Why should I tremble? They will stumble and fall. My heart will not be afraid. I will remain confident. We have to realize that God is the biggest. He's not just bigger than us. He's not just bigger than our problems. He's the biggest. He's the one that we need to recognize as having sovereignty and authority over all things. And we can't allow, if we really want to grow in our relationship with God, we cannot allow anything to take that top spot. There's a guy named Paul David Tripp. He put it this way. He said, every human being is a worshiper in active pursuit of the thing that rules his heart. This worship shapes everything we do and say, who we are, and how we live. It amazes me some of the things that people worship or put time into. I can't point too much of a finger at this. I read comic books. It doesn't get any crazier than that. Doesn't get any sillier. But I'm 45 and I read comics. But there's pursuits and then there's worship where it just kind of takes precedence over everything else. I was channel surfing one time, and I came across a commercial for a reality TV show about men who compete in beard competitions. You heard right. They compete in beard competitions, which I would have never put those two things together, but someone did. And they showed this guy, and just long beards with curl. They wax them, and just these things that just go out to just, we're talking like Yosemite Sam type, just nuttiness with like curls and woo, and they're interviewing them and they're talking smack about each other. I know my beard is better than his. Okay, it's hair. It's unbelievable some of the things that people just put as their top pursuit in life. Some people worship celebrities and don't just, think that they're cool or admire them. They pursue them. Jennifer Lawrence, young actress, very big right now. She really just kind of came into the limelight very quickly, very suddenly, and she was talking about how there are men who camp out and sleep on her front lawn. Yeah, creepy, weird. I know, just these people that, it's not like, hey, she's a good actress. It's like, the voices in my head told me she loves me. It's just these, and they just pursue these things that are just, and one of the things that we have to constantly ask ourselves, hopefully you're not stalking anybody, but, is there something that is competing for the top spot in my life? Is there something that just is edging everything else out? And this could be a lot of things. It could be golf. It could be fishing. It could be comic books. It could be video games. I've seen it be those things. It could be, so many things. And one of the sort of a self-evaluation questions that we need to ask ourselves periodically is, God, is there something that has taken the top spot away from you or has the potential of doing so? Is there something that's taken that spot completely or has the potential of doing so? Because God is biggest, and He's the one. If we want to grow in our relationship with the Lord, He needs to have that top spot. The second thing is this: worship is loving God. Worship is loving God. Psalm 27:8 says, "My heart has heard you say, 'Come and talk with me.' And my heart responds, 'Lord, I am coming.'" Just a really cool verse. And worship is loving God. And my main idea for my message today is the fact that worship really is an attitude of the heart. And one of the times in my teens and college days, one of those lessons where God was kind of consistently smacking me on the back of the head was in the area of worship and really trying to help me, to be very frank, adjust my attitude. I did not have a good attitude during the 80s. It was, and I mean that on so many levels. And I'll never forget this time where, God's really just sort of speaking to me about worship. And I went to this tiny, tiny little country church in the middle of Georgia, middle of nowhere. And I'm there, and they had just this tiny little piano, had not been tuned ever, just this woman, this ancient woman was at the piano. I mean, I don't want to exaggerate things. She was about 1,000 years old. Claw hands at the piano. It would have sounded better if she just had 2 rubber mallets just going at the piano, just like this. I mean, it was just, just awful. And this is no joke. We sang a song, got through the first verse and the chorus, when we realized she was playing one song and we were singing another. It's just that it was so consistently bad that they just, well, okay, so yeah, that'll smooth things out. It was, and I'm just sitting there going, wow, okay. And I had to make a decision right then and there. Am I going to pout because they're not playing the music the way that I think that they should? Am I going to allow circumstances to dictate my attitude, or am I going to take responsibility and love God? Am I going to take the time, focus on Him, not look for a worship experience, but a closer walk, a deeper understanding with God? Very often we have to ask ourselves that. Let me tell you, I love the guys when they play. I love it. I love, I really like it. When my rib cage is vibrating, I'm just like, oh yeah, that's it. That's the ticket. I love that stuff. But it's not about an experience. It's about getting close to God. That's the pursuit. And loving Him, not the experience. Worship is always loving God. And then third, worship is our highest priority. And even as I read this statement, I realized that I'm not really putting forth the drama that I need to behind this statement. Worship is our highest priority in life, on this planet, all the time, in every situation. Worship is our highest priority. And that may be difficult for some of you to grasp. The first time I heard it, I was just like, are you serious? It is. It's our highest priority. Let me read the verse to you. Psalm 27:4, he says, "The one thing," the singular, "the one thing I ask of the Lord, the thing I seek most is to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, delighting in the Lord's perfections and meditating on His temple." David understood that being in God's presence was serious. It was serious business. And he understood this because of the time that he lived in. I'm going to try and keep it as short and painless as I can, a little bit of a history lesson, okay? All right, we're adults. We can get through this. All right. So, Israel is chosen as the nation that is going to be the representative of God on the earth. They are the representative nation. They are to communicate to others about God. And with that came blessings and responsibilities. God said, you follow me, you'll be blessed. And you are to share these things with other nations. You are to express the law, how to live in a way that follows God. And you will be caretakers of my presence on earth. And what happened was Moses and the Israelites, remember Sunday school, they leave Egypt, they were slaves, they come across the Red Sea, and Moses is on the mountain, he gets the 10 Commandments. He also gets instructions on how to build this tabernacle. Detailed, insanely detailed instructions, down to what the little hooks that the curtains would hang on would be made out of. And what we find out in Hebrews is that the tabernacle, which is just a big fancy word for God's temple, the tabernacle that they made was a copy of the tabernacle that God resides in heaven. That's where the pattern comes from. And God gives that to Moses. Every room is to be a certain size. Every wall and piece of furniture is to be made out of a specific material. Every single piece needs to fit certain dimensions. The men, the priests, before they go in, they have to dress a certain way and they have to make certain preparations to cleanse themselves of sin before they can even go into certain rooms. And all of these instructions are laid out to Moses so that he can share them with the Israelites. And in Exodus 29:42, there's really just one verse I want to share with you, 45, but I want to go back a little bit. It says, these burnt offerings are to be made each day from generation to generation. Offer them in the Lord's presence at the tabernacle entrance, again, God's temple. There I will meet with you and speak with you, speaking to Moses. I will meet the people of Israel there in the place made holy by my glorious presence. Yes, I will consecrate the tabernacle and the altar, and I will consecrate Aaron and his sons to serve me as priests. In other words, do all of these things, make all of these preparations, make the furniture, the building, the walls, the outfits, get the priests ready. Verse 45, then I will live among the people. Then, not before, I will live among the people. And the tabernacle was one giant object lesson that my presence, being in my presence, is serious. There was one, the farthest room, the deepest room was called the Holy of Holies. That room was where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. Priests were allowed to go in there, only priest could go in there, just one, and only once a year. God's presence is serious business. And Jesus, because worship should be our highest priority, when he died on the cross and cleansed us from sin, all of those preparations that all of those priests and all of those people of Israel had to go through before they could even step into certain rooms, all of that went away. And Jesus, being the perfect sacrifice, perfect and eternal, made the way to step into God's presence any time we please. That's why when you read the story about Jesus' death and when he dies, the curtain in the temple that separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple is split in two. And today, you can go into God's presence while driving your car, while you're in the shower. And there's a outrageous and wonderful benefit to that, and there's a little drawback. We take it for granted. We think that God lives here, inside the church. Maybe he plays basketball when we're not around, No, we can step into his presence anytime that we want. And God made that way clear. And we should take full and outrageous advantage of that. Is worship the recognition that God is biggest? Are you loving him? Do you make it your highest priority? When you do those things, because 2 weeks ago I talked about that there's, God often presents an invitation and an adjustment and a mission. And last week, the guy that spoke here, many of you were here. Do you remember the guy that spoke last week? Talked about missions, bald, looked like Daughtry. Remember him? Okay. He kind of hijacked my sermon a little bit today. He talked perfectly. It was right on target with the point of us worshiping is to, and this is my last point, is to make other worshipers. As we're invited to adjust our lives so that God is at the top, the highest priority, we begin to share that with others and to lead them into an understanding of what worship is so that they can be worshipers as well. And he actually goes through this passage of Scripture. I want to read it to you again. The Psalm 67, and he talked about how we always focus on Psalm 67:1 and don't venture too far after that. Psalm 67:1, may God be merciful and bless us. May his face smile with favor upon us. The perfect snippet to go into any greeting card, but we never really go very far past that. May your ways be known throughout the earth, meaning God's. Your saving power among people everywhere. May the nations praise you, O God. Yes, may all the nations praise you. Let the whole world sing for joy, because you govern the nations with justice and guide the people of the whole world. May the nations praise you, O God. Yes, may all the nations praise you. Then the earth will yield its harvest, and God, our God, will richly bless us. And then see this in verse 7. Yes, God will bless us, and people all over the world will fear him. One leads into the other. It doesn't stop with us. That idea of fear, meaning a worship-filled awe. Just that idea of being in God's presence and being overwhelmed. So, quick question. Can we be an example of worship if the only worship we do is in here? No. That alone, the fact that we are to be examples of worship, shows that worship takes place in many forms, in many ways, in many places. We worship God when we serve others. We worship God when we use our talents. We worship God when we spend time in prayer, seeking his will. We worship God whenever we say, okay, God, what do you want me to do? And worshiping God is a lifestyle. It's not something that just takes place between 11:30 and 12 on Sunday morning. It's something that happens as often as you want it to. You know, there was a church, they did this really cool thing. I don't know what church it was, but I just thought it was really neat. At every exit, every street leading out of the church, they put a sign that says, you are now entering the mission field. Yeah. And we really need to recognize that the church is not a building. We are the church. As we accept those invitations, as we make those adjustments, we are to be mission-minded as we go back out into the world. And there's a lot of ways that that's expressed. But I just want you to as much as you can, realize that worship is something that you should be pursuing on a regular basis. And please don't go home and say, okay, well then I'm going to go home and I'm going to pray 3 hours every day. No, you're not. Let's just be honest with ourselves. what you want to do is you want to start asking, okay, God, I want to grow in my time of worship. I want to grow in my connection with you. I want to grow in my understanding of you, all worship. What would you have me do? What's a step that you would have me do? And just ask that. And you want to hear something nuts? When you ask God, God, what would you have me do? What is a way that I can grow in my worship? That's worship. That's putting him first. That's growing in your desire to love him more and put him in the top spot. That's worship. And so, really begin to ask yourself, God, what is it that you would have me do? I want to go ahead and ask the worship team to come on up. In closing, if you want to spend time in prayer at the cross, please feel free to do that. We also have a couple of communion stations open. If you'd like to take part in that, we always have one in the back, one in the front. Feel free to help yourself to that. Also, maybe that relationship with God has not been begun yet. Maybe you got saved a really long time ago. You began that relationship, but you've never gotten baptized. What we have here at the church is a blue bag. We have some on stage. There's some at the back as well. And if you pick up one of these, this is an opportunity for you to explain to you what it means to accept Christ and to have him as your forgiver and your leader, to begin that relationship with him. You pick up one of these, somebody will come alongside. You may have to, sometimes people, they grab the bag and they kind of slip away. So if nobody comes up to you, feel free to ask somebody with a yellow lanyard. But they will explain to you in about 8 minutes, in very simple terms, what it means to have that relationship with Jesus Christ. Okay? But as we close, pay attention to the words of the next song. It really kind of captures what David was trying to express in Psalm 27. And let this final song be a time of prayer. Think about what God might have you do. Pray, Lord, where would you have me go? But take the time to really think through the song. Remind yourself of who God is and what it is that he might want you to do. Accept that invitation to grow just a little bit in your understanding of who